In the world of motorsport, few personalities have ever been as big as Edmund Patrick Jordan. The founder and team principal of Jordan Grand Prix from 1991 to 2005, he created a legacy in the team that broke the mould, that broke the brains of the Formula One paddock, that broke everything. It was a banking strike in his home city of Dublin that paved his way into motorsport. He went and worked in Jersey as an accountant, and during this period was when 22-year-old Jordan discovered kart racing. Upon his return to Dublin the next year, he purchased a kart and began racing, winning the Irish Kart Championship in 1971. The switch to cars was inevitable, and he moved up to the Formula Ford Championship, then Formula 3, before shattering his leg and setting him back. He did, to his credit, win Formula Atlantic, race in Formula 2 after this, and test for McLaren, but it was an experience in 1979 that would shape the man that we got to know. He and Stefan Johansson would race in British Formula 3 under Derek McMahon, and despite attracting sponsors through his big personality, he would ward them off with his performances on track, and so the logical step would be retire from racing and manage a team, of course. At the end of the year and short of money, Eddie founded an official team, Eddie Jordan Racing, which was set to run prior to the 1981 season. Its formative years were spent in Formula 3 and later Formula 3000 with solid drivers like David Leslie and Sears and James Weaver, as well as future Formula 1 talent Martin Brundle, but it was 1987 and Johnny Herbert that exploded the team into the limelight. He would take victory in the 18-round Formula 3 Championship ahead of what was a pretty strong grid, including no fewer than 9 future Formula 1 drivers and a future Formula 1 champion in Damon Hill. In between the 1987 and 1988 seasons, Johnny Herbert would test a Benetton Formula 1 car and would initially be offered a seat by team manager Peter Collins, only for the Benetton family themselves to veto the offer, suggesting he should have a season in the Formula 3000 first, and they plumped for Alessandro Nannini instead. Jordan, sensing an opportunity to get seen, named the Formula 3000 entry Eddie Jordan Benetton Jr. team. Having Herbert race in a green Benetton Formula suit as well made for the perfect story with the perfect picture to capture the headlines and potential sponsors. This was not the only opportunity he spotted this season though, and in a classic EJ move, he refused to take no for an answer. The victory in the opening round of the 1988 Formula 3000 season was taken by Johnny Herbert, but it was the livery that took more of the headlines once again. The car was almost blank, save for a Avon Tyres sticker on the front wing end plate and a Camel Cigarettes banner on the side pod. Best part was, Camel wasn't even a sponsor. In fact, they'd rejected Jordan. His response to this rejection was to borrow Camel stickers from another team, put them on his car anyway, and get them on the front page of Autosport. Lo and behold, the next race, the car was bright yellow, the colours of the cigarette brand, Camel. More success would follow in 1989 with John Lacey's F3000 Championship and Eddie Irvine's third in 1990, which got Jordan thinking, specifically, about the big time. This would be much longer of a process, with money needed and Camel on their way to Benetton. He was hoping for a Kodak sponsorship due to the similar shade of yellow the livery would have been, but that fell through. Not that he told Fujifilm that. In fact, he told them they were close to sealing a deal, and that would have been a disaster considering they were big rivals. And so he left the boardroom with a sticker sheet. Another sticker deal went with the Irish Tourism Board, and an investment from new title sponsor 7up gave them the funds to purchase an expensive set of Ford engines. Now, all they needed was a car. He asked former McLaren mechanic and 1988 F3000 Championship winning technical director Gary Anderson to design him a Formula 1 car. This would later become known as the Jordan Ford 191, the first car of the renamed now Formula 1 Jordan Grand Prix. While John Watson tested the 191, he was 44, so the team opted for 29-year-old Bertrand Gachot in the infancy of his Formula 1 career alongside Andrea de Cesaris, and they both took to pre-qualifying for the season opening United States Grand Prix. De Cesaris wouldn't pre-qualify, but Gachot would, and so it was down to the Belgian to give the team a good result. He placed the car 19th in Q1. Decent start, but in Q2 he put in a lap 1.8 seconds quicker and ended up starting P14 for their debut race. He would retire with 6 laps to go, but was classified in P10 on debut. That's not too bad. It got even better at round 5 of the season, the Canadian Grand Prix. Of course, luck like retirements for both McLarens and Ferraris helped, but your first points finish in Formula 1 as a team being P4 and P5? Impressive stuff, especially as you would back it up, scoring points in all of the next 4 rounds. A dream year for the Irish outfit so far, and they were on cloud 9. Nothing could possibly go wrong. Let's wind the clocks back a bit. 10th of December, 1990. Bertrand Gachot is on his way to meet representatives for Jordan and 7up about the upcoming season, and he is late. In his desperation, he was bumping the taxi in front of him to try and get them to hurry up. The taxi driver didn't take too kindly to this and got out of his car, grabbing the Belgian by his tie. In defence, Gachot sprayed him with tear gas, and both men went to the police station to schedule a court date. A court date that was agreed to be a week before the Belgian Grand Prix, Gachot's home race. He initially expected a fine or a suspended sentence and didn't think anything of it. However, when he left the court, it was in cuffs. He was sentenced to 18 months in prison, and Jordan was without a driver. Eddie, the wily businessman he always was, instantly knew who he wanted to bring in to replace Gachot. It was a man with sponsor money, $150,000 of it, to be specific, but he had way more than that. The next 22 years would show that. And Jordan, who by this point played a part in the careers of esteemed drivers like Martin Brundle, Jean Alesi and Eddie Irvine, now handed a Formula One debut to Michael Schumacher. He impressed at a test drive a week before the race, but despite his manager claiming that he knew the circuit well, he'd only been there as a spectator. De Cesaris was supposed to show him the ropes, but he was held up at contract negotiations, and so Schumacher was left to learn a circuit he'd never driven before for a car he'd driven once by cycling around all 7 kilometres. Jordan no longer had to compete in pre-qualifying, and so went straight through to the real qualifying session where in Q1, De Cesaris placed 13th with a 1 minute 54.1. Not too bad, pretty standard where they stood for most of the season. Schumacher, in his first competitive session, went 9 tenths quicker. 9 whole tenths quicker. Incredible. As a result, he was P8 in Q1. Q2 and De Cesaris went 2.2 seconds faster to set a 151.9. This puts in P11, a decent result by their standards. Schumacher went 7 tenths quicker. The German, on his Formula One debut, gave Jordan their best qualifying yet with P7. And so naturally, the paddock was abuzz with this Schumacher lad. His clutch failed up Eau Rouge after lap 1, a disappointing fate to suffer after all his good work before, but the best was yet to come that weekend for Jordan. Problems for frontrunners Gerhard Berger, Nigel Mansell, Alain Prost and Jean Alesi saw Ayrton Senna dominant at the top despite a problem. P2, 3 and 4 were battled out by Nielsen Piquet's Benetton, Riccardo Patrici's Williams and De Cesaris. On lap 31, he made his way past Piquet and started to break away even with Patrici chasing. This was dream stuff for Jordan, who looked set for their first podium finish in Formula One, and when Patrisi started to suffer gearbox issues and drop back, it looked even more set. Lap 41 of 44, and there was only 3 laps to go for De Cesaris' fairy tale run in the race. But at some point, this fairy tale had to come to an end, and when his engine blew, hearts were broken as his dream weekend trundled to a halt. It would get even worse for Jordan, as despite an agreement in principle to race the rest of the season, nothing was put to paper and he was sniped by Benetton, leaving Eddie to scramble once again. Settling for a rotation of the man Schumacher replaced, Roberto Moreno and Alessandro Zanardi for the rest of the season. 5th in the Constructors was an incredible result considering the monopoly the top 4 teams had over the 6-point scoring position throughout the season, but it wasn't enough for Fujifilm and 7up to stick around, and so EJ Wes left looking for drivers, sponsors, and now a new engine, as he couldn't afford to run the Fords with no sponsors, missing payments, and Ford pulled out of the deal. Sasol, a petrochemical company, came to throw money at the highest team outside the top 4, and similarly, Yamaha were looking to promote their new supercar and offered up their engine for a 4-year deal. Eddie Jordan left 1991 behind with a completely new team rejecting Gasho's advances post-prison, and instead went for 2 drivers disappointed in their 1991 performances and looking for improvements, Stefano Medina and Maurizio Gugelmin. They were expecting a worse season, but weren't quite expecting how bad it was going to be, with just 1 point scored all season, putting them joint last of the Constructors that survived the season. In fact, Medina only scored that point in the last round, saving their skin. Yamaha were kicked out for 93, and it was the end of Medina and Gugelmin's Formula One careers. He opted for a different strategy for the season, with the engines provided by Brian Hart on an exclusive deal, and the lineup consisting of promising rookie Rubens Barrichello and whatever pay driver could muster up enough for that second seat. Once again, a poor season saw their only points scored at 1 round, with both Rubens Barrichello and Formula One debutant and Jordan prodigy Eddie Irvine making his return to the team in P5 and P6. Irvine was beat back down to earth quite literally post-race, as his idol Ayrton Senna was unhappy with actions performed by Irvine in the race, and so came to the garage and, well, punched him, because that's how you solve an argument. Despite this, the result was promising for Jordan, and they both returned for 1994, although Senna may have had a point as Irvine received a 3-race ban for poor driving standards in the first race of the season. A crazy race weekend for the team, all things considered, as while this was going on one side of the garage, Barrichello was scoring their best results since 1991. The Brazilian was joined by home driver Aguri Suzuki for the 1994 Pacific Grand Prix, but was seen as a seat filler for the 3 races Irvine was banned for, while Barrichello would be the primary focus, and it paid off. He would qualify P8, and benefiting from retirements from faster cars and drivers, he would come home in P3 to take Jordan's first podium in Formula One. He also picked up their first pole by gambling on slicks in the Belgian Grand Prix and was going 0.331 seconds quicker than Schumacher. Barrichello having a scary incident in Imola aside, probably their best season yet was a sign of progress. A string of 4th place finishes across the season, including one by De Cesaris, who returned to the team for the final 2 races of Irvine's ban, saw them finish P5 in the Constructors once again, more comfortably than before, as they seemed to be easily the 5th fastest team at most races. McLaren switched to Mercedes power for 1995, created a space in Peugeot's engine program, an opportunity Jordan snatched at, especially as it came with the investment of Total Energies as a new title sponsor. A first double podium finish for the team was overshadowed by the rumours of Schumacher's potential switch to Ferrari for 1996, but it was by far the highlight in another stable season where they got beaten to P5 by Ligier. This was enough for a huge offer to come in from cigarette brand Benson and Hedges, changing the outlook of the team. No longer did they need to scrounge around for smaller sponsors or pay drivers, as now B&H, Barrichello and Peugeot was enough to keep them going. A final Formula 1 season beckoned for Martin Brundle then, who rounded out his career the way it started, managed by EJ. Another stable, if unremarkable, season for Jordan beckoned, as this time they were comfortably the 5th quickest team, even if Ligier's victory in Monaco flattered their results and made it look a little bit closer. Both drivers would leave at the end of the season, Brundle to commentate and Barrichello to the newly formed Stewart Grand Prix, and Jordan would once again prove his incredible talent ID by replacing them with Formula Nippon champion Ralf Schumacher and Minardi driver Giancarlo Fisichella. 12 points and 1 podium apiece in the first half of the season was a decent start, and they headed to the Hockenheimring for Ralf's home race, the 10th of the season. Mid-season testing was run in the week after the last round, and it promised for the team, topping 2 of the 4 days. Fisichella, in the meantime, announced his move to Benetton after the season, leading to him wanting to show off and prove that they were right to pick him. A front row start then, only 200ths off pole. Not a bad way to start. The Italian did a stellar job to ward off the Ferrari of Michael while keeping track of Gerhard Berger, and the race developed into a 2-horse one for the lead. Different strategies were taken, with Fisichella on a 1-stop and Berger on a 2, meaning the Benetton would be faster but also had to make up 30 seconds per pit stop. On lap 24, Fisichella came in for his one and only stop, with Berger needing to build that gap that he could only eke out a few tenths per lap. This was hinted even further when he came up to lap Jan Magnussen just after the Dane had an engine failure, spraying the Austrian with oil and smoke. As such, Berger emerged from his second and final stop a few seconds behind Fisichella and struggled to make up the gap, and it was in the hands of the Jordan outfit, and they looked to be on for a win. Lap 39 of 45. Fisichella picked up a puncture while running through debris, which isn't race ruining in itself, but the subsequent damage to the radiators was, and so Jordan, once again, had a groundbreaking result, snatched away from them by bad luck. This could have been the perfect way to top off what was another stable season for Jordan, who picked up one further podium on their way to, you guessed it, P5. Fisichella leaving meant that a new driver had to be drafted in for 1998, and Williams letting go of their former world champion created a perfect opportunity. Damon Hill would join Ralf Schumacher in what was at the time probably a top 3 lineup in the field. This was a great chance for Jordan to take themselves out of the midfield and towards the front, swapping Peugeot for Mugen Honda equally as such. They were quick, but reliability problems hampered them severely, and as such, they failed to score a point by the halfway point of the season. Mike Gascoigne was drafted in from Tyrrell to bolster the technical team, and Gary Anderson resigned a few months after, and results took a significant spike. Points at Silverstone, points at Austria, double points in Germany, more points in Hungary. They were on a roll just to try and revive their season, and they rocked up to the 1998 Belgian Grand Prix with just 10 points but sitting in P5. Qualifying promised, with Damon Hill taking a season best P3 and Ralf back in P8, showing they had pace. The race itself, though, was a completely different spectacle. Completely different conditions in the monsoon-like rain, it became much more of a lottery. It was decided somehow that the race would start without a safety car, and almost as a direct result, chaos ensued. David Coulthard, who started on the front row, dipped a wheel onto the metal grille on the side of the track and went sideways across the racing line, causing an insane domino effect that became known as the Great Pile-Up. Wirtz, Barrichello, Herbert, Panis, Trulli, Salo, Diniz, Takagi, Rosset, Nakano, Verstappen, the biggest first lap incident since 1973. Luckily, no one was injured, and everyone was eligible to retake the starts due to the rules at the time. 4 didn't, and so we were left with an 18-car grid that took to the restart. Hill, who did not have a good start on the first stab, got the opportunity to do it again, and he grabbed it with both hands, setting off well and taking the lead into turn 1. Title rivals this year, Mika Häkkinen and Michael Schumacher behind, were battling for position, which caused more drama as Häkkinen lost control and was hit by Herbert, retiring them both. Coulthard once again had issues, this time with Wirtz rather than the 12 others, retiring the Austrian and dropping the Scotsman to the rear of the field. Finally, the safety car was deployed, with Hill leading behind it with Michael in second and Irvine in third, who would quickly have an off-track moment and lose his front wing. The Ferrari got past the Jordan pretty sharpish and built up a huge gap while Jacques Villeneuve span. The Ferrari was nearly 40 seconds ahead of Hill by the time he came up to lap David Coulthard, who the McLaren team had promised would move out of the way. He didn't do so instantly, but finally lifted off as they headed towards Pouhon. Crucially though, he didn't move off the racing line, and with Schumacher in poor visibility, he slammed into the back of the McLaren, retiring them both, although Coulthard, probably scared of what Schumacher was going to do to him, rejoined the race. On the same lap, Irvine span out, ending Ferrari's involvement in the race completely and taking the involved cars down to 6, although with Coulthard rejoining and Shinji Nakano doing the same, it was back up to 8. Hill, Ralf, Jean Alesi, Heinz-Harald Frentzen, Pedro Diniz and Jarno Trulli in that order, and that is exactly the same order that the race would finish in, with Jordan incredibly taking a 1-2 finish. And despite the British national anthem being played instead of the Irish one to celebrate the victory, their spirits in the race couldn't be dampened. could they? After the race, news broke that Ralf was actually prevented from overtaking Damon, which angered his older brother Michael. Jordan was confronted in his motorhome and told that Ralf would not race for the team again. He did, and in the next race, Ralf would score another podium, but he would leave at the end of the season to join Williams after Michael bought out the contract for £2 million. These results meant that they just about squeaked past Benetton to fourth in the Constructors, a best for them, but the best overall, well, that was yet to come. Firstly, a personal win for EJ. He sold 40% of the team to Warburg Pincus, seeing the Irishman well and truly wealthy. Some have said that after this, his focus appeared to drift and he began to slide into the background. 2 difficult years for Hill's Williams replacement. Heinz-Harald Frentzen saw him leave and Jordan saw an opportunity, snapping him up for 1999 to race alongside Hill. The Brit finally started to show signs of his age, retiring at the end of the season, but Frentzen relished the new environment. 2 wins in France and Monza and 4 podiums in Australia, Brazil, Germany and Belgium, as well as an injury for Schumacher and a regression in Williams and Benetton, saw Frentzen and Jordan take P3 in both the drivers' and constructors' standings. For 2000, Hill was replaced by Jarno Trulli, who'd taken a podium in what was a pretty poor cross car the year prior, and it was a season of regression, not quite hitting the same height to the previous one. Once again, they had victory snatched away at Monaco, as Trulli's gearbox failed and they ended up with Frentzen in P2. Never mind. Only 2 podiums and P6 in the Constructors for 2000 marked the beginning of a decline for Jordan. The team switched to Works Honda engines for the next year after Mugen left the sport at the end of 2000, creating a struggle between them and the other Honda running team BAR as to who would run the engines long term. The driver lineup appeared to remain the same, but disagreements between Frentzen and EJ left the German with no choice but to be released, and veteran John Lacey being drafted in for the final few rounds of the season, becoming the second Jordan prodigy to end his Formula 1 career with the team. Clearly the Irishman was a fan of sentimentality. They finished 5th ahead of rivals BAR and the Constructors, but a first podiumless season since 1993 was cause for major concern. They did find themselves in headlines though, for trying to take Vodafone to court, claiming the company had made a verbal contract with them before retracting the contract and going to Ferrari. 2 months later, they withdrew the action, agreeing to pay Vodafone's legal costs. This was a blow from which the team never recovered. They reorganised for 2002, with Jarno Trulli moving to Renault and Lacey retiring. 5 years after leaving, Giancarlo Fisichella jumped ship from Benetton, while Takuma Sato made his Formula 1 debut in what appeared to be a power play to try to convince Honda. A drop in results from the previous 2 years saw a drop in sponsorship money too, and with that, the domino effect that would lead to the end of Jordan Grand Prix was set in motion. They would finish 6th, courtesy of 3 5th places and a 6th. That was it for a team that could have been competing for a title just 3 years prior. For 2003, Honda left Jordan to concentrate on BAR, and with it went Sato. Fisichella would be joined by last season's Formula Nippon champion Ralf Furman in the Ford Cosworth-powered EJ13. A high of 10th from Furman after 2 rounds of the season was cause for some concern, and they headed to the 3rd round of the season in Brazil, needing a good performance. A season best 8th on the grid when the previous highest result was P14. Not a bad start to the weekend in Interlagos. Rain was forecast for the race and the final preparations were done on a flooded track due to a torrential downpour. Therefore, the race started under safety car. It took 8 laps for them to finally get away. 2 laps later, and 2 former Jordan drivers who were ahead of Fisichella on track, Trulli and Ralf Schumacher, made contact, and Schumacher span down the order. Despite the improving conditions, there was still carnage. Justin Wilson, Furman, Olivier Panis, Antonio Pizzonia, Juan Pablo Montoya, Michael Schumacher, Jos Verstappen and Jenson Button all retired within the first half of the race due to incidents. The 40-50 lap period saw a lot of pit stops and Rubens Barrichello missing his opportunity and running out of fuel, and on lap 52 race leader David Coulthard peeled into the pits, leaving McLaren teammate Kimi Raikkonen in the lead, with Fisichella second and Renault's Fernando Alonso third. 2 laps later and Raikkonen was struggling himself, understeering into Magulho and Fisichella passed him. He wasn't struggling as bad as Mark Webber though, who lost car grip at Arcabancadas and slammed into the barrier, leaving 3 of his tyres strewn around the circuit as well as the rest of the car. Alonso didn't notice the waved yellow flags ahead of him and hit one of those wheels at around 170 miles an hour, launching the Renault and the Spaniard into the wall, needing attendance. Because of both the debris from the incident and the subsequent attendance tending to Alonso, and the fact they were over 75% of the way through the race, it was decided to red flag on lap 55 with Fizzy in the lead. The sporting regulations stated that the race would be deemed to have finished when the leading car crossed the line at the end of the lap, 2 laps prior to that lap, during which the signal to stop was given. Whatever that means. Essentially, the person whose lap started first will be awarded victory. Fisichella's flashed up first before resetting to the previous lap, and Raikkonen stayed, therefore Kimi was handed the win. Basically, race director Charlie Whiting looked at the timesheets and went, nope, and appealed, which was accepted, and victory was handed to Fisichella for his first and Jordan's last Grand Prix win. In 2004, they felt the effects of not only the overall poor performances, with the win from Fizzy being 10 of the 13 points they took home, but also the Vodafone lawsuit. Benton and Hedges finally pulled funding, as did DHL, bringing into question the future of the team. Nick Heidfeld and Giorgio Pantano, later to be replaced by Timo Glock, took the team to second to last in the constructors, ahead of only Minardi. Ford's decision to put Cosworth up for sale before the 2005 Formula 1 season saw Jordan left without an engine deal, leading EJ to panic and sign a very costly deal which saw them with Toyota engines in their car. Around this time, February 2005, Eddie was introduced to a man named Alex Schneider. Schneider would end up purchasing Jordan Grand Prix for $60 million, a move that hurt Eddie to the point of tears. The team would be named Jordan for the 2005 F1 season and actually took a podium in the hands of Tiago Monteiro at the controversial United States Grand Prix, but it wasn't the same team and became Midland the next year. A lot of development later, it still sits, kind of, on the Formula 1 grid as Aston Martin, even if not under the original Jordan Grand Prix entry. For a man whose life was the Formula 1 team, from the moment he woke up, from the moment he went back to sleep, this would have been a devastating decision to have to make. He would never see the Jordan team achieve the aim of winning a championship, although they gave it a bloody good crack. The plucky businessman would become a pundit, podcaster, writer, musical artist, presenter, and manager for Adrian Newey in his move from Red Bull to Aston Martin, alongside other business ventures. He was an Irish icon who got Oran Navian played on the global stage. The world is a lot emptier without EJ.